Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world where Tuesday doesn't exist. Birthdays are outlawed, and your watch is lying to you because someone in Paris decided that time itself was due for a revolution. Welcome to the French Republican calendar. It's year 2, Thermidor, around the midnight hour. But don't get too cozy, because under this calendar, midnight is no longer the middle of the night, and Thermidor isn't a month most people even remember. Picture it: cobbled streets, wet with summer rain, tricolor banners wilting on their poles, and distant echoes of boots in a city too nervous to sleep. Somewhere behind closed shutters, a government clerk is awake, scratching out the old date and replacing it with the new. Not July, not Monday, not even the 28th. It's the 10th of Thermidor year 2, and it might just be the last day of someone's life, because if you've forgotten your new holidays, your paperwork, or how to say tomorrow in revolutionary French, you're in trouble. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. There just don't use the Gregorian calendar, or Robespierre might rise from the grave. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through the darkness of a Paris transformed, where even the stars feel like they've been assigned new names. The streetlights flicker on what used to be the Rue Saint-Honoré, but has now been renamed Rue de la Loi, Law Street. Because saints are out, logic is in. You pass a baker's shop shuttered and quiet, but you can still smell the ash from the day's last loaves, each one weighed not in pounds or ounces, but in decimal grams. Even your footsteps feel different here. The days aren't broken into the same rhythm you once knew. No Sunday bells to orient you, no midweek lull, no gentle rise toward the Sabbath. It's just day 1 to day 10. Over and over, the decade, a 10-day week with only one rest day decade at the end. If you're used to weekends, too bad. You're on revolutionary time now, comrade. The air feels strangely electric. Not just from politics, though those are everywhere, but from the calendar itself. It isn't just a list of days. It's a manifesto, a weapon, a statement that the monarchy, the clergy, the entire medieval order is dead and time must die with it. You pause at a corner where an old church used to stand. It's gone now, replaced by a temple of reason. Inside, where candles once flickered beside stained glass, a bust of Rousseau sits beneath an awkward banner that reads, "To be a citizen is to be divine." You're not sure what that means. No one really is. But what you do know is that you are standing inside a completely reinvented version of time. Because when the French Revolution reached its fever pitch, the leaders of the new republic decided that changing kings and laws wasn't enough. No, if they wanted to purge France of its feudal, religious, and royal past, they had to start with the calendar. Historians still argue whether this was visionary or just completely bonkers. Some call it the most logical calendar ever made. Others say it was a bureaucratic nightmare with a poet's soul. But either way, it happened. For 12 intense years, from 1793 to 1805, France abandoned the world's standard calendar and invented its own, 12 months, each with exactly 30 days. None of this 31 1 month 28 and other nonsense. Every week, 10 days, Every day divided into 10 hours. Each hour split into 100 minutes. Each minute into 100 seconds. A perfectly rational decimal system. Very enlightenment. Very confusing. But there were quirks. For example, each day had a name not named after gods or emperors or Norse warlords, but after vegetables, animals, and tools. Instead of St. Valentine's Day, you might get Day of the Hoe. Agricultural, not romantic. Tonight, the calendar reads 10, Thermidor Year 2. It's the anniversary of Robespierre's downfall. But no one says that aloud, not here, not now. Instead, they observe it in silence in new time. Because in this new world, even memory must be reconstructed. You walk past a printing house, still clanking away into the night. Inside, a tired apprentice is laying fresh type, not with the date 1794, but with year 2. And if he gets it wrong, if he accidentally prints the date in the old style, that's grounds for suspicion. Revolutionary time is strict. But even in the silence, even as the rain begins to fall and the lanterns flicker low, you feel it, that twinge of awe. Because this isn't just a new calendar. It's a new world ticking forward 1 decimal second at a time. You wake the next morning to a different kind of sunlight, softer filtered through the dusty shutters of a revolutionary lodging house. Someone outside is arguing about radishes. Someone else is sweeping cobblestones with the self-importance of a man who believes history watches him. You stretch, but something feels off because your internal clock, like everyone else's, is broken. You don't know what weekday it is. In fact, there aren't weekdays anymore. There's only the number today is the 11th of Thermidor, and that's all you get. No Tuesday, no Wednesday, no comforting anchor that tells you how far from Friday you are. Just numbers. Just the metric march of time. And it didn't happen by accident. You get dressed, rough linen. Of course, nothing aristocratic, and step into the street where the bakery sign has been changed again. Not the name, but the operating license posted beneath it, stamped with an official revolutionary calendar date. The old one, the bourgeois calendar, has been scratched out violently in red ink. You make your way toward a public notice board, hoping to find your bearings. Instead, you find a pamphlet nailed up with excessive enthusiasm. Why the old calendar is a prison. It screams in bold type, and just below it, a faded broadsheet with the proud title, Year I Begins, the Tyranny of Time Ends. You pause and read, letting the words crawl into your bones. Because once upon a time, this city lived by a rhythm, shaped by monarchs and monks. The 7-day week was steeped in religion, every month, wrapped around feast days, saints' anniversaries, and sacred seasons. The Gregorian calendar, the one you grew up with, was Christian to its very core. Sunday was sacred. Christmas marked the year's heartbeat. Even leap years had papal approval. The revolutionaries, they hated all of it. To them, the Gregorian calendar was more than inefficient. It was a weapon of oppression. It reminded citizens of their bondage to king's bishops and the whims of ancient tradition. It told them when to rest, when to worship, when to marry. The new republic wanted none of that. So they did the most radical thing they could think of. They killed the old calendar. Historians still argue whether the change was driven more by ideology or by a very real frustration with the irregularity of dates. After all, why should some months have 31 days and others have 28? Why should February get all the weirdness? And what exactly was the point of Saints' Days when the church had been declared an enemy of the state? The logic was simple. If you're going to rebuild society from the ground up, you can't let time itself be ruled by superstition. And so, on 22nd September 1792, the day France was declared a Republic Year One officially began. Not in secret, not quietly, but with fanfare, fireworks, decrees. The clocks didn't just tick forward. They leapt off the table, wrapped themselves in tricolor sashes, and demanded a new existence. The names of the months were the first to go. No more January. February, March, those were Roman royal and religious. In their place came names drawn from nature, from farming, from the pulse of the earth. Autumn began the year, and it sounded like poetry. Vendémiaire, Brumaire, Frimaire. Then, winter nivose, pluviose, ventose, spring germinal, floreal, prairial, and summer, summer, came with messidor, thermidor, fructidor. Each name described what the world did during that time. Pluviose for rain, thermidor for heat, germinal for seeds. It was time reimagined as a seasonal song. You smile at the memory of your first attempt to learn them all. It took weeks. You still get germinal and floreal mixed up. You start walking again deeper into the city's center. Even the buildings look confused. Carved stone dates have been chiseled off. Church clocks are frozen, some missing their hands. People glance up at the sun, not because it's beautiful, but because they're trying to figure out how far into their decimal day they are. Oh yes, decimal time. We'll get to that nightmare soon. But right now, what you feel is the subtle ache of displacement. Because when time loses its familiarity, so do you. You forget birthdays. You forget anniversaries. You forget how to say next Wednesday, because Wednesday isn't a thing anymore. Even your own birth date sounds like a bureaucratic riddle. A woman beside you asks for directions and refers to the date as the third quintidy of thermidor. You blink. That's day 13. Or is it 15? You pretend to know and send her on her way. The funny thing, for all the disruption, there was something sincere beneath the change. The revolutionaries believed they were liberating people, not just from kings, but from confusion. From calendars that served the church. From months that meant nothing to farmers. From weeks that bent around the Sabbath instead of sunlight. It was utopian. It was wildly impractical. It was also kind of beautiful. And as the sun climbs higher, somewhere in the clouds above, it casts its light over a world that for a brief moment in human history tried to rewire the very gears of existence. And you just need to figure out if today is a market day or not. You step off the cobbled street and into a narrow square where a small crowd is gathered beneath a faded banner. Down with Sunday, up with Decady. A man in a blue waistcoat is shouting at no one in particular, waving a pamphlet overhead like it's a holy text. Except there's no holy anything anymore. It's the 12th of Thermidor Year 2. And yesterday, if you're counting by the Republican calendar, was Decady, the one and only rest day in the new 10-day week. You missed it. And your legs are reminding you there's no weekend anymore. The 7-day cycle you once took for granted is gone. Sunday, that lovely, sacred little pocket of rest, where church bells rang and bread tasted sweeter, has been abolished. Sunday, the revolutionaries said, was the crown jewel of the church's tyranny. So, it had to die. You shake your head, remembering your first decade. You were confused, exhausted, and had walked into a tavern hoping to hear a choir, only to be offered a public reading of the rights of man. It was not as catchy. The man with the pamphlet catches your eye and beams. Citizen. Have you celebrated reason today? You offer him a neutral nod, which is all the response he's really hoping for. He returns to his shouting more symbolic than sincere. This new rhythm of time was meant to free people, but mostly it just scrambled them. You wander to a shaded bench and sit down beside a shopkeeper, carefully repainting the day's date on his sign. 12 Thermidor, Quartidi. Not Thursday, Quartidi, the fourth day of the decade. You ask him how he keeps it all straight. He snorts. I don't, he says. I write it on my hand every morning. The revolution had declared war on memory itself. Not just who ruled you, but when you lived. In this world, Sunday was now just the seventh day of forgetting. Replaced by Decadii, the new festival of reason. On every 10th day, you were to rest, attend civic ceremonies, maybe clean your neighborhood fountain, and listen to speeches about liberty. You miss Sunday. You really, really do. Historians still argue whether the destruction of the 7-day week was a bold political masterstroke or just a massive headache dressed up in Enlightenment theory. Because here's the thing. The 7-day week, as chaotic as it is, had been around for over 2 millennia. It spanned continents and cultures. It gave people rhythm balance, something to count on. The new 10-day week. It stretched work-muddled markets and exhausted everyone from butchers to bureaucrats. Try telling a baker to go 9 days without a real break. Or a teacher. Or a street cleaner who can't remember whether tomorrow is primity or sextity. Even the revolutionaries struggled. You walk past a classroom where a teacher is drilling children on the new week. Repeat after me. Primiti, duodi, tridi, quartidi, quintidi, sextidi, septidi, octidi, nonidi, decadi. The children respond in sleepy unison. One yawns halfway through octidi. Another mutters something about missing church. The teacher glares. You remember how the calendar reprogrammed everything, even the cycle of rest and exhaustion. Under the Ancien Regime, Sunday wasn't just spiritual. It was a social glue. A time for markets, for weddings, for gossip in front of the bakery. Without it, people began to feel adrift. That's why Decadi festivals were invented. They were supposed to replace religious services with civic ones. No hymns, just oaths. No incense, just banners. No saints, just the Republic. One time, you watched a Decadi ceremony where a group of citizens dressed in sashes stood around a bust of liberty reciting from Rousseau, while a musician plucked a harp. A child released a dove. It got caught in a banner and fluttered there awkwardly. No one knew what to do. The priesthood of the old calendar had been replaced with a bureaucracy of timekeepers. They published new almanacs. They printed date converters. They created charts to help people remember if Thermidor had 30 days it did, or if Pluvios began on a Friday, which it didn't. Fridays don't exist anymore. You look up at the clock tower in the square. The hands still move in circles, but no one trusts them. The faces have been altered to include decimal hours, 10 of them, instead of the usual 12, and the citizens below pretend to understand. You don't even look. You've learned to judge time by the shadows on buildings. Because here's what no one tells you. Even when you change the calendar, people's bodies remember. Your stomach still expects lunch on a seventh-day cycle. Your dreams still schedule themselves around old birthdays and feast days. Your sense of rest, it refuses to follow the party line. And yet, there's something hypnotic about it all. The numbers, the syllables, the way each month flows like a line of poetry. Niveaux, pluvios, ventos. Even the weeks have a cadence. You catch yourself whispering them, sometimes, just to feel like you belong. The city bell tolls again. It's Quartitti, the fourth day of the week. And you, like everyone else, are still trying to find where you fit in a calendar that erased everything you used to know. You spend the afternoon wandering past the dusty skeletons of old rhythms. A market half filled with sullen vendors who can't remember whether this is a proper trading day. A tailor's shop closed early because his assistant thought it was nonity. It's not. It's still Quartitti. But who's counting? No one, apparently. You pass a barber sitting idle on a stool flipping through a torn government gazette with the date year 2 Quartitti Thermidor 12. He mutters something about missing his old calendar. Says it, let him feel the weeks new, when to stock extra candles, when to expect weddings, when to raise his prices before St. Joseph's Day. Now, there is no St. Joseph. There is no day. Only the flat drum roll of the Decade. The 10-day week had a clean mathematical symmetry, 1 decadi for rest, 9 to labor. But in practice, it was chaos. Shopkeepers were exhausted. Factory workers were confused and peasants. They just ignored the whole thing and kept working by the sun, the soil, and the songs they remembered. You duck into a nearby wine shop where a group of old men play cards beneath a crooked sign that reads, "Open every octady unless decadi." None of them know what day it is. One raises his glass and sighs. "My bones say it's Saturday," he mutters. "But I suppose my bones are monarchist." They laugh, and you do too, because that's what it comes down to. The body remembers what the mind is forced to forget. The 7-day week had been etched into habits, muscles, conversations. The decade, this shiny new rhythm of reason, never stood a chance against centuries of muscle memory. You sip watered wine and let your mind drift. Historians still argue whether the decade was meant as a real social experiment or just a symbolic rejection of Christianity. Some say it was the product of radical minds who genuinely believed time could be purified. Others think it was a bureaucrat's dream turned national prank. Either way, it didn't land well, especially not in rural France. In the countryside, farmers kept using the old calendar in secret. They still called it Wednesday, still brought grain to market every 7th day, still celebrated saints' days quietly with whispered prayers and disguised pastries. A few even kept 2 calendars, one in the kitchen drawer, another hidden beneath the flour sacks. But here in the city, resistance was trickier. Public life revolved around the new system. State forms, school schedules, court dates, military orders. Everything bore the stamp of revolutionary time. If you used the wrong date in the wrong context, especially in year 2, you might get reported. Not jailed necessarily, but watched. And once you were on a list in revolutionary Paris, you didn't get off. Even letters had to toe the line. You remember receiving one from your cousin in the provinces, written carefully in the new format, Duo di Messidor, 22 year 2. But hidden in the margins, faint and faintly Catholic, she'd written P.S. Happy Feast of St. John. We remembered you at the fire. A quiet defiance. You feel it everywhere. In the weary shrug of a baker who hangs a closed for decades sign, but still opens the back door for regulars. In the old woman selling rosemary bunches from a cart painted with faded saint names she now claims are just her grandchildren. In the young couple arguing about whether their anniversary is on Quartity the 28th or Friday the 15th. It's both, and neither. You pass a small schoolroom near the river where children recite multiplication tables beneath a chalkboard that reads, "Today is Quartity. Tomorrow is Quintity." One child raises his hand. "But when is my birthday?" The teacher pauses. That's the trouble, isn't it? When you blow up the past, what do you do with the pieces that meant something? The calendar didn't just change the shape of time. It erased the personal landmarks, birthdays, death days, name days. In the Republic of Reason, there were no saints, and therefore no names to celebrate. No holidays based on miracles or martyrdom. Only the civic festivals assigned like flower rations, carefully spaced and suspiciously devoid of joy. You climb a narrow hill path as the sky softens into evening. It's still, Quartity still, Thermidor, still year 2. But none of those things comfort you, because without familiar rhythms, time stretches. Days bleed together like spilled ink on official paper. The decade is orderly, but it's also endless. You find yourself longing for something, anything with a heartbeat. A rhythm you didn't have to memorize. You pass a fountain where someone has chalked the old date in secret, Wednesday, July 30th. The chalk is half erased, but you see it. Someone else remembers. The wind shifts, and in the distance, a bell tolls from a decommissioned church tower. Just once. Not on any schedule. Not by permission, but there it is. A sound your bones still understand. You wake up to the sound of rain hissing through open shutters, splashing onto worn floorboards. It's early, though you can't say precisely how early. Your clock has been modified to count to 10, and you've never quite trusted it. Decimal hours sound clever until you need to know when breakfast is. Outside, the streets glisten, and the city smells like wet stone and overripe fruit. Someone is shouting about carrots. Someone else is cursing the calendar again. You smile, because today is the day of the parsnip. Yes, really. It's 13. Thermidor year 2. And according to the official Calendrier Républicain, each day of the year is named not for saints or celestial events, but for simple, earthy things. Plants, tools, animals, minerals. The revolutionaries wanted to replace holy days with harvests, meaning with matter. So they made a list, 30 days per month, 12 months. Each month broken into 3 decades of 10 days. Every single day with its own name. Not Monday, not St. Catherine's Day, but chicorée, navet, pioche, chicory, turnip, pickaxe. It's glorious. It's ridiculous. It's also surprisingly charming. You step out into the street as a delivery boy shouts, "Parsnip Day," to no one in particular. He grins. Hope it's good luck. You nod. You're not sure if he's serious or if he just enjoys the joke of living in a world where parsnips have a place on the sacred calendar. Historians still argue whether this naming scheme was sincere poetry or bureaucratic satire. On one hand, the calendar's architect Fabre d'Églantin was a poet and dramatist. On the other, he died in a revolutionary purge not long after his parsnip plan was enacted. Some say the calendar killed him. Some say the parsnip did. Either way, he left behind a legacy of agricultural devotion. No saints, no martyrs, just potatoes, manure, and the occasional wheelbarrow. You turn a corner and pass a florist arranging sprigs of thyme and basil beneath a chalkboard that reads, "Today parsnip. Tomorrow, vetch." You don't even know what vetch is. The month names are just as odd and poetic. You recite them to yourself like a lullaby. Vendemiaire, brumaire, frimaire. Nivos, pluvios, ventose. Germinal, floreal, prairial. Messidor, thermidor, fructidor. Each one chosen to reflect the rhythms of nature rather than the dictates of ancient Rome. Thermidor, where you now find yourself, means heat. The heat of revolution. The heat of summer. The heat of decisions made too quickly. And on this 13th day, where the rain feels out of place and the markets have begun to rot slightly at the edges, the name feels ironic. You stop beside a stall where a bored vendor is carving vegetables into little figurines. A parsnip knight jousting with a beetroot. He glances at you. You know he says on day of the hoe, "I carved a guillotine." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. It was oddly therapeutic. This is the surreal genius of the new calendar. It demanded people reimagine their world. It stripped time of its inherited meaning and then reassigned meaning root by root, tool by tool. Days of the hammer, the dog, the sage, the honeycomb. An entire year rebuilt from soil. It didn't stop with naming. Official planners published almanacs, illustrated guides filled with each day's object, complete with suggested celebrations. On the day of the spade, honor manual labor. On the day of the ox, reflect on perseverance. On the day of the pumpkin, maybe bake something orange and hopeful. You wonder what kind of pastries people made on Gourd Day. Somewhere, down the avenue, a group of school children marches in a crooked line, chanting the month names aloud. Their teacher waves a tricolor baton like a maestro, pausing dramatically before each syllable. One child trips on pluvios. Another mispronounces fructidor as frightenedor. The others laugh. You do too, because it's all so earnest. The revolutionaries really believed that naming the world differently would change it. That by replacing saints with seeds, they would uproot old beliefs and sow something new, something rational, natural, virtuous. But people aren't made of perfect systems. They're made of memory, of habits, of stubborn affection for names they learned in childhood. And so for every person who greeted Turnip Day with excitement, there were 10 others who still lit candles on All Saints and called it something else. Quietly, carefully. Often in their kitchens, where the calendar didn't reach, you keep walking. Past the print shop that sells mini almanacs with vegetable drawings. Past the tailor stitching little plant names into children's cuffs. Past a wall where someone scrawled in charcoal, "Bring back Saint Honoré." You smile, then stop beside a bakery where the chalkboard reads, "Parsnip bread." 5 sous, not revolutionary. And that perhaps is the calendar's legacy. Not revolution, not tyranny, but this strange, arranged tenderness. A city where parsnips, scythes, and goats once had their day literally, and where memory survives in corners, jokes, and half-erased chalk. It's the 13th of Thermidor. You are alive, and you remember how strange it is to mark time by roots and rain. The rain clears by mid-morning, and with it comes a sudden weight in the air, a kind of sticky summer heat that creeps down your collar and makes the cobblestones hiss with steam. It's still Thermidor after all. The month of heat, the month where even the revolution once burned too brightly. You trudge through a garden near the old Palais Royal, where children chase each other under chestnut trees and toss petals into the wind. A street poet is reciting something about the geometry of July to an audience of one bored pigeon. You pause, because Thermidor isn't just a poetic name, it's part of a whole seasonal philosophy that shaped the new calendar. You remember the structure, 12 months each, with exactly 30 days. 3 months per season. 4 perfect quarters of time all lined up like military drills. And each season wasn't just spring, summer, fall, or winter. They had names, moods, personalities. Autumn begins the year not January. The season of harvest and ferment. Vendémiaire, vintage. Brumaire, fog. Frimaire, frost. Winter follows with névosa snow, pluviose rain, and ventose wind. Brutal, simple, honest months, named not for emperors or gods, but for the things that sting your skin and soak your shoes. Spring rises with germinal germination, floreal blooming, and prairial meadows. A gentler season, but still radical, designed not to honor rebirth as religion, but as revolution. Seeds, not souls. Then comes summer, where you now stand. Messidor harvest, Thermidor heat, and Fructidor fruits. It's the season of ripening, of decision, of consequences. You sip lukewarm water from a public fountain shaped like a liberty cap and lean against the rail. Thermidor, in particular, has a reputation. It's not just a hot month, it's the hot month. The one where robes stick to backs, tempers flare, and revolutions die. It was the 9th of Thermidor year 2 when Robespierre fell. One day, he was the voice of virtue, the next a man bleeding on the floor of the convention. Historians still debate what the Thermidorian reaction truly meant. Was it a restoration, a pause, a betrayal of principles, or just the inevitable crash after a year of blood speeches and a calendar that tried to teach people how to think? You look around the park. A boy kicks a ball made of rags. 2 women argue gently over whose turn it is to mind the laundry line. A dog naps beneath a bench. Life continues, even in Thermidor. But you remember a poem you once heard scribbled on a cafe wall? In Thermidor, the grapes grow fat, but the truth rots faster than that. The calendar wasn't just about structure, it was about vision. It imagined time as something natural, earthy, and pure. No more borrowed days from ancient Rome. No more moonlit rites. Just clean, universal rhythms. Everything grounded in agriculture, in reason, in the soil beneath your feet. You pass a classroom where children trace the months onto wax tablets. Vendémiaire, Brumaire, Frimaire. One child pauses. But what about January? The teacher winces. Not anymore. You don't blame the kid. The names sound beautiful, sure, but alien, especially to a world that still holds on to the old calendar in whispers. January never really died. It just went underground. At the edge of the square, a shopkeeper sets out a small chalkboard, Thermidor sale, decady only, honey and pickled plums. You think about buying some. You don't. You're not even sure what day of the decade it is anymore. Quintididi sextidi. Something that sounds like a seashell. You walk instead, past a row of former churches, now serving as temples of reason. Their bells silence their naves, painted over with tricolor murals. One of them has a mural of the four seasons, each personified not by gods or angels, but by farmers, smiths, and washerwomen. Spring wears a garland of wheat. Summer fans herself with a scythe. Autumn holds a barrel. Winter just shivers stoically in a blanket. And there at the top, carved in small letters, time belongs to the people. You stop, not because it's inspiring, but because it's complicated. The people didn't ask for time. Not this time anyway. Not a time without saints, without Sundays, without July. But for a while, just a while they tried, and there's something beautiful in that trying. Something impossibly human in naming your months after fog and mud and apples, in tearing down emperors and replacing them with seasons. You sit on a low stone wall as the sun crests over the rooftops, baking the stones beneath you. Thermidor lives up to its name. Your shirt sticks to your back. The air tastes like iron and fruit, and somewhere nearby a clock chimes, not 12 times, just once. Maybe it's 3 in decimal hours. Maybe it's 10 o'clock in the world you remember. Either way, time continues. And here, in the heart of a calendar that tried to purify the seasons, you are reminded that summer will always smell like heat and stone and strange decisions, even if you call it Thermidor. You walk slowly now, dragging your fingers along a stone wall, streaked with old graffiti and fresh government slogans. The sun climbs higher, but you're in no rush. Because today, oddly enough, you've realized something you don't remember: your birthday. Not the real one anyway. You know the new date. It was converted and stamped on your citizen's card when the calendar changed. You were born on 23 Floreal year, -12, whatever that means. But what was it before? You try to calculate, tracing mental lines back through Vendemiaire and Messidor, trying to decode where April or May used to be. You give up, because the calendar didn't just rename the months. It erased the past. You cross a small bridge over the Seine, its iron railings wrapped in faded ribbons from a recent Decadi festival. A sign hangs off one side. Happy Birth of the Constitution. Sextidi. Messidor 14. You blink. That sounds significant, but you're not sure why. And there it is again, the familiar ache. In creating a rational world, the revolutionaries had to destroy irrational memories. Birthdays, name days, anniversaries, all those personal constellations that helped people navigate their own lives. They didn't fit into the new grid. They weren't universal. They weren't Republican enough, so they were written out. Saints were the first to go. With the church stripped of power, there was no need to honor the hundreds of holy names scattered across the old calendar. Gone was Saint Genevieve, Saint Martin, Saint Catherine of the Wheel. Gone were the festivals and markets and excuses to rest or bake or cry. Instead, the new days came. Turnip Day, Rake Day, Dog Day. You smile faintly. It's hard to put candles on a cake for Rake Day. You stop beside a wall covered in children's drawings, chalk scrawls of names and flowers. One says, "Happy Birthday, Marie," with a smiling sun over it. Below it, someone's crossed out Marie and written Citizen number 4287. Probably a joke. Probably. Historians still argue whether the removal of personal milestones was part of the calendar's logical structure or just a symptom of deeper cultural erasure. After all, what is a self without its dates? Without the memory of your parents telling you stories about a storm on the day you were born, or how your grandmother always sent cherry preserves each year on the same morning. You pass a baker offering small cakes shaped like fruit in honor of the apricot. He shouts, gesturing to the date board. 13. Thermidor, Apricot Day. A group of school children gathers. One asks, "Is it a holiday?" The baker shrugs. "Sure, why not?" This is how people resist, not with fire, but with flour. You remember how the old feasts used to feel. Saint days and birth dates marked by dances wind the odd goat parade. Now, under the Republic, the calendar is uniform. Every month is equal. 30 days, 3 decades, 10-day weeks. No favoritism, no indulgence. Except people still crave specialness, so they invent it. They whisper old names. They hold unofficial dinners. They light candles, not for saints, but for memories they're not supposed to keep. You keep walking. A small shop tucked between 2 apartment blocks has a curious sign in its window. Calendars recalculated. Discretion guaranteed. Inside, a woman with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers looks up from a stack of parchment. You nod once. She slides over a chart, 2 columns side by side. On one, the old calendar. On the other, the new. You point to a date 23 Floreal. She traces her finger across the page. May 12th, she says softly. You exhale. That was it. That was your birthday. For a second, it returns. The scent of lilacs, the warm bread, the soft voice that used to hum in the kitchen. Your mother, probably, or a neighbor. You're not even sure anymore. The woman nods, slides the chart back. No words, no payment. Just memory offered gently, like contraband for the soul. You step outside, dazed. The city continues around you. Its people reshuffling their days, adjusting their thoughts, trying to believe that time is just math and paper and perfectly spaced decades. But you know better, because as much as the calendar tried to flatten your past into uniformity, memory resists. The people resist. A boy passes you with a red ribbon pinned to his chest. It says, "Je suis né le 4 juillet." I was born on July 4th. Underneath, someone added in pencil. So what? So everything. That's what they forgot. In trying to cleanse time, the revolutionaries had made it sterile. And in doing so, they overlooked the quiet ways people tether themselves to the world, a shared birthday, a festival, a date etched into a tree. You make your way back across the bridge, thinking of the drawings, the chalk, the cakes shaped like apricots. You were born in May. You remember now, and that's enough to feel human again. It's the afternoon of 14th Thermidor, and the bureaucrats are out in full force. You wander toward the administrative quarter rows of heavy stone buildings with names like Bureau of Civic Vigilance and Commission for Metric Compliance. People queue in long, slow-moving lines, their eyes glazed, their papers clutched like lifelines. Each form stamped, each date converted, each name doubly verified. You take a number and sit down near the back of the Ministry of Temporal Rectification. Your request. A new citizen certificate to replace the old one, now invalid, because it still bore your Gregorian birth date. The man next to you sighs into his tricorn hat. Had the wrong year on my marriage license, he mutters. Turns out, I was married to my wife before she was born. You glance sideways. That must have been awkward. Not as awkward as trying to explain it to the conciliation board of Decady Affairs. You both sit in silence for a moment. Because this right here is where the revolutionary calendar stopped being poetic and started being a pain. Forms, errors, delays, everything had to be translated. Your rent contract, wrong dates. Your business license needs reissuing. Your grandmother's will, good luck. See, the calendar wasn't just an abstract shift. It was law, mandatory. And if your paperwork didn't match the system, ground to a halt. No exceptions, no grace period. You either complied or got left behind in a pile of increasingly irrelevant documents. You watch a clerk behind the desk shuffle through a stack of forms so thick it could repave the street outside. He rubber stamps each one with a heavy, almost theatrical thud. 15 Thermidor Year 2. Behind him, a dusty poster, one people, one republic, one calendar. You're starting to understand why people lie. Historians still argue whether the mandatory enforcement of the calendar was a calculated effort to control the populace or just a side effect of revolutionary optimism, spiraling into obsessive policy. But there's little doubt that the administrative nightmare it created reached every corner of French life. Take the decimal time system, for example. You glance up at the wall clock in the bureau. It's one of the new models, 10 hours on the face, each divided into 100 minutes. It ticks softly, mockingly, around a dial no one understands. Decimal time was supposed to be the crown jewel of reason. Divide the day into 10, even slices just like the weeks. Everything clean, mathematical. Enlightened. But the moment you try to schedule lunch, disaster. You once met a watchmaker who claimed he could build a decimal pocket watch. He ended up throwing it in the river. Said it made him hate geometry. You're called to the front. The clerk barely glances at you. He slides a form across the desk. State your name and your place of registration under the current calendar. You hesitate. The truth is, you don't know which version he wants. The corrected version, the original, or the interim one issued after the Festival of the Constitution. They all say different things. You choose one at random and hope for mercy. He stamps it, hard. You feel the table shake. Your new certificate will be ready in approximately 3 decades, he says without emotion. That's 30 days. You ask if you'll get a reminder. He stares at you. There is no Sunday citizen, he says. You will remember it yourself. You leave the office with a throbbing headache and a strange urge to eat cake shaped like a calendar. You duck into a nearby cafe where the menu is written in both calendars. One column reads Thermidor 14, Pioche Day. The other just says July 31st. Someone's added in tiny cursive, God help us all. You order a glass of lemonade and collapse into a corner. Around you, people murmur about the upcoming Sanskalatides, the 5 bonus days tacked on at the end of the year to make the math work. One man calls them the revolution's apology. Another says he celebrates them instead of his birthday. Someone else grumbles about trying to pay taxes across 2 calendars. He raises a toast to confusion, the truest legacy of liberty. They all clink glasses. You sip slowly, watching as a woman opens her wallet and pulls out an old coin, pre-revolutionary, tarnished, with the face of Louis XVI still barely visible. She rubs her thumb across it. Don't show that at the post office, she says, and slides it back inside. That's the thing about bureaucracy. You can reinvent time, rename days, reschedule markets, even replace saints with shovels, but people will always carry their own clocks. Some of them shaped like birthdays, others like heirlooms. You leave the cafe and re-enter the street just as the public bell rings out. not for the hour, but for Ducati preparation. A kind of reminder that tomorrow, people are officially allowed to rest. You don't plan to. You've got a new certificate to wait for, and perhaps a parsnip cake to buy. The next morning, you're woken by the sound of arguing geese. Apparently, someone brought livestock into the square for a civic market that was scheduled for quintity. Only today is nonity, or so. The city herald insists, shouting the date with wild certainty from the fountain steps. The geese don't care. Neither do the vendors. You rub your temples and step outside, where the argument has expanded to include 3 vendors, 2 scholars, a horse, and 1 very confident child who insists it's still sextiti because his uncle said so. And here it is in full bloom, the chaos of revolutionary time. Because, for all its elegance, its decimal symmetry, and agrarian poetry, the calendar never quite stuck where it needed to. Especially not in the places that actually fed France. The rural towns, the frontier villages, the muddy farms where people still measured time in sunrises, church bells, and the thickness of stew. In those places, the decade was a rumor. The months were a joke. And the officials, who tried to enforce the calendar, let's just say they were treated like sheep trying to govern wolves. You remember one story from the provinces. A government agent arrived to confiscate all Gregorian calendars in a village near Lyon. By sundown, someone had nailed a carrot to his door and written, "Return on Pumpkin Day." He never did. Historians still argue whether the revolutionary calendar failed because it was too rational or because it was too French. Designed in smoky salons and printed in fine fonts, it didn't account for the warm mess of human behavior. Peasants didn't want to count in decades. Shopkeepers didn't want to change all their receipts. Priests didn't want to stop ringing bells. And most people, especially outside Paris, didn't hate the old calendar. It may have been imperfect, but it was theirs. You walk into the market where someone's selling apples in bundles of 10 under a sign that says decade friendly next to him. Another stall sells cheese in quarter wheels labeled Frimaire Special. The irony, it's still Thermidor. You approach a cheese seller and ask what day it is. He sighs. In Paris or in real life, you don't know how to answer that. The government tried everything to make it stick. Mandatory date conversions, decimal clocks in public squares, inspectors who checked that people were using proper decade terminology. There were even traveling lecturers who explained the virtues of the calendar using diagrams, pamphlets, and on at least one occasion, a puppet show. You remember seeing one of those as a child. A puppet of time, wearing a powdered wig, was guillotined by another puppet wearing a tricolor sash. Then everyone sang a song about liberty and asparagus. It was memorable, but all of it couldn't replace how real people use time. A merchant once told you he got fined for writing Tuesday on a shipment form. He had simply forgotten out of habit. His shop assistant whispered that most clients still use the old days when placing orders. Old calendar for money, she'd said new one for inspectors. The market reflects this quiet rebellion. A sign lists prices for bread. 5 sous, Floreal, 6 sous, Thermidor. Market fluctuates with rainfall and political arrests. Someone laughs. It's not a joke? Not really. You pass a stall where a woman is embroidering handkerchiefs with the month names. She offers one to you, Fructidor stitched in gold. You decline politely. You're not sure you'll still remember the name next week. She shrugs. No one does, she says. But the thread is real. There's a kind of dignity in that, isn't there? The calendar was meant to unite everyone under the banner of rational time. a shared civic identity free from kings and popes. But instead, it revealed just how stubbornly people hold on to chaos, to tradition, to their own sense of when. You walk to the edge of the square and watch a priest in plain clothes bless a child, quietly, discreetly, on what he claims is the feast day of an old saint, though the official calendar calls it the Day of the Flail. They both seem to believe it. You lean against the wall and close your eyes. All around you, the city ticks not in decimal hours, but in footsteps. Arguments, smells of roasted chestnuts, and the sound of a distant violin playing something achingly old. The calendar can change, but time belongs to the people. Afternoon settles like dust across the rooftops of Paris, warm and golden with shadows that stretch too far for how early it supposedly is. According to the government's decimal clock, it's the 7th hour. According to your stomach, it's late for lunch. According to your bones, it's whatever day came after confused. You make your way down a quiet street where a small crowd is gathering around a public speaker, standing atop a box once used for fruit. His voice is sharp, his clothes a little too clean for this side of the river. He's reading from a pamphlet with the confidence of a man who has been paid to believe it. The calendar is not merely an instrument he proclaims. It is a mirror of reason, a rhythm for the Republic, a hymn to the cosmos. You stop, not because you believe him, but because this particular sermon is new and deeply ambitious. Behind him, a large linen banner flaps in the wind. It reads, "Time is revolutionary, and the heavens are republican." You raise an eyebrow, because this is Robespierre's legacy. You lean against a warm wall and watch the crowd, most of whom seem more interested in the speaker's hat than in his ideology. Still, his voice cuts through the dusty air. To live, by Thermidor, he says, is to live in harmony with the stars. To count time in decades is to reject tyranny. The old calendar was arbitrary. This one is cosmic. Someone near you whispers, "Does the cosmos know what day it is?" You stifle a laugh. But the speaker has touched on something real, something dangerous. Because at the height of the French Revolution, especially during the Terror, the calendar wasn't just paperwork or poetry. It was purity. Time was moral, sacred, weaponized. Robespierre saw the calendar as an extension of virtue. By restructuring time, the people would restructure their thoughts, their souls, their very perception of the universe. Historians still debate whether he genuinely believed the calendar could create moral citizens, or if it was just another mechanism of control. But one thing's certain, under Robespierre, the calendar became holy, a civic religion. You saw it once with your own eyes. It was at the festival of the Supreme Being. A strange, theatrical affair. The Committee of Public Safety transformed Paris into a kind of secular cathedral. There were paper mountains. Robespierre stood like Moses atop a man-made peak, his arms raised in beatific triumph. He wore blue. People whispered that he looked like a prophet or a corpse. At that moment, the calendar wasn't just ticking forward. It was ascending. It promised a future with no priests, no kings, no sins of the past. A future counted not in meaningless saints' days, but in days of the plow, days of the cow, days of the hammer and the hope. You wander away from the speech, your thoughts heavier than the afternoon air, because you remember how quickly the dream soured, how the calendar, once a symbol of liberation, became a tool for measuring loyalty. If your bakery posted the wrong date, were you a royalist? If you baptized your child using the old calendar, were you a counter-revolutionary? If you celebrated your wedding on St. Martin's Day, even accidentally, did that mean you wanted the monarchy back? It was never about the days themselves. It was about what they represented. Time became a test. And Robespierre, he was its high priest. You reach the edge of a public square where the remnants of another civic festival linger, red, white, and blue streamers tangled in a tree. A faded placard honoring the first decade of Thermidor, Day of the Pickaxe. You sit on a stone bench. A woman nearby hums an old church melody beneath her breath. Not loudly, just enough that you can catch it if you listen. She makes eye contact and stops. You nod. There's an understanding. Because even now, even in the cleaned up, renamed, rebranded rhythms of revolutionary time, the old notes still play. They just play quieter. You think about the decimal hours. Again, the attempt to divide time into perfect slices like cheese at a civic feast. You saw one of the few clocks that still ticks in that fashion. It looked like it was trying to behave, but each click seemed apologetic, unsure. No one uses them anymore. They were too early, too clever, too lonely. You pull a scrap of paper from your pocket. Scribble today's date, Thermidor 15 year 2. Then below it, August 2nd, 1794. 2 times, 2 truths. Only one of them fits in your mouth without hesitation. The sun dips lower. Someone plays a flute on a rooftop. The speaker from earlier has vanished. The crowd has dispersed. But the idea that time can be rewritten to reflect the will of a nation that lingers like incense. The calendar wanted to be a mirror of reason. Instead, it became a mirror of power. And now with each passing decade, fewer people are looking into it. Evening cools the edges of the day. As you step into a small clockmaker's shop near the Rue du Faubourg, the bell above the door gives a tired chime, like it's been asked to measure too many hours lately. Inside, the air smells of oil, iron, and stubbornness. You've been here before, once, maybe twice, but the layout hasn't changed. Gears line the shelves like sleeping insects. Long case clocks lean against the walls, all of them paused, awaiting hands or purpose. In the corner, a dust-covered showcase holds 3 oddities: a brass sundial, a watch with a decimal face, and a mechanical rooster that never worked properly, even in the best of times. The shopkeeper is hunched over a bench, squinting at a gear the size of a coin. He looks up when you step in. Decimal or traditional? He asks. You hesitate, just curious. He nods slowly. That's what everyone says. He gestures to the decimal watch in the case. No one wants them anymore. Beautiful little failures. You step closer. The face is clean. 10 numbers in a perfect circle. No 12, no 6. Each hour, theoretically 2.4 of your old ones. 66 minutes long. Each minute 100 decimal seconds. And yet the thing is lovely, shiny, optimistic, completely unusable. You remember the first time someone tried to explain decimal time to you. It was during the early phase of the calendar's implementation. A street lecturer had drawn diagrams in chalk, explaining that 1 decimal hour would help the brain work cleanly. That symmetry would breed clarity. You left with a headache and a biscuit. Decimal time was part of the calendar's grander ambition to unify everything from laws to lunch breaks. If we could just simplify time, reshape it into something perfectly ordered, we might become better people. But the human body is not decimal. It doesn't sleep in tidy slices or think in hundredths. It pulses in rhythms carved by sun and shadow appetite and exhaustion. Decimal hours meant dinner came too early or too late. Sleep was interrupted. Bells rang at odd intervals. People missed meetings, missed church, missed life. Historians still argue whether the decimal clock was meant to last or if it was symbolic from the start, a gesture of allegiance to logic. Either way, its real-world adoption was a disaster. Factories didn't convert. Postmen ignored it. Even Paris ground zero for rational time couldn't be bothered to follow it consistently. The shopkeeper offers you a chair. You sit. Watch as he tinkers with the sundial, wiping it carefully with a cloth that's older than the Republic itself. I used to believe in it, he murmurs. Thought we could build a better world if we just measured it differently. And now you ask. He shrugs. Now I repair clocks. People bring in the broken ones and ask for the old numbers back. You glance around. Several pocket watches tick away on a shelf, quietly contentedly using 12-hour faces. Familiar hands. Familiar ticks. Do you ever fix the decimal ones, you ask? He smiles, sad and proud. Only for collectors or liars. You thank him, leave a few coins on the table, and step back outside into the night. The streets are quiet. Lamps flicker. The city exhales. You pass a boy sketching in chalk on the pavement. He's drawing a clock face, big and round with numbers up to 10. He writes revolutionary time in loopy letters underneath, then pauses. He rubs it out and starts again this time with 1 to 12. He doesn't look ashamed, just tired. You think about all the people who tried to make decimal time work, the architects who rewired their buildings to reflect the new hours, the workers who stood at factory doors waiting for 10th hour bells that never came, the parents who tried to teach their children how to tell time from a sun that didn't care what calendar it obeyed. Time, it turns out, is loyal only to its own rhythms. You pass a fountain where water drips steadily in the quiet. Not in decimal. Not in any measured way. Just in its own cadence. Irregular. Real. You sit nearby and pull out your old watch. It's battered. Pre-revolution. The glass is scratched. The second hand lags when it's humid, but when you press it to your ear, it still ticks. 12 hours, 60 minutes, 60 seconds. Unreasonable, imperfect, and completely human. You walk the city. After dark, your watch ticking quietly in your coat pocket. A sound so familiar, it feels like breathing. The streets are emptier now. Candlelight flickers behind shutters, and only the occasional clatter of a cart or murmur of laughter breaks the hush. Somewhere a dog barks twice, and then forgets why. You pass an alley where a group of students huddle around a low table playing cards by lantern light. A sign leans against the wall. Tonight's game. Calendar roulette. You pause. One player explains they each take turns calling out a random revolutionary date. The others have to guess the corresponding Gregorian one. If they get it wrong, they drink. Someone slurs, 18 Brumaire, year 8. Another guesses, November something. Laughter. The bottle is passed. The real answer, someone mumbles, is when Napoleon took power. No one seems particularly bothered by the details. You smile, because this is the fate of all systems. Pushed too far, they become games. Trivia. Background noise. Earlier today, you saw a man selling hand-drawn calendars from a push cart. One side had revolutionary months and vegetable days. The other side, in faded ink, still used January and Sunday and Easter. He sold both, of course. He understood his customers because outside the bureaucrats, the ideologues, and the decimal clockmakers, there lived a quiet resistance. Not in protests, but in habits, in smiles, in shrugs. Like the seamstress who still embroidered St. Anne's Day into pillowcases, then claimed Anne was a goat. Like the bookseller who filed his volumes under both calendars, Floreal and May, depending on who asked. Like you walking the streets with your old watch ticking against your ribs. Historians still debate how deep the rejection went. Was it nationwide? Was it passive-aggressive? Was it laziness or loyalty? But the truth doesn't care. It's there. In the facts, people stopped using the new calendar long before it was abolished. They simply drifted away from it. You make your way toward a familiar bridge where a street musician strums a slow tune. The melody doesn't belong to any festival, certainly not a decady hymn. It sounds older, folkish, like something sung on a feast day that's now illegal. You lean on the stone rail. Across the river, the dome of a repurposed cathedral gleams faintly. It's now called the Temple of Universal Worship. But most people just call it the Dome. No one says what they worship there anymore. Maybe time, maybe not. And below the dome, in one of the wide squares, a statue still stands. Not of a king, not of a general, of time. A man with a shovel in one hand, a tree branch in the other. No clock, no scythe, no wings, just the patient tools of farmers, of gardeners. You watch a group of children playing nearby. One climbs onto the statue's base and waves a stick, pretending to be the embodiment of Fructidor. Another yells, "No, you're Messidor." They argue. Then they laugh, because no one really remembers anymore. And that's how it ends for most revolutions, not with guillotines or treaties, but with forgetfulness. Not suppression, but mispronunciation. The words blur. The systems erode. Not with fire, but with shrugs. You start walking again, back toward your small apartment above the print shop. As you pass familiar storefronts, you notice little contradictions. Gregorian date books next to tricolor posters, Catholic holy cards tucked discreetly beside almanacs that still mention Parsnip Day. The coexistence isn't polite, it's practical. At your door you pause. Someone's written in chalk beside the entrance. Today is Tune August, or Thermidor 15, or maybe both. Go to bed. You chuckle, rub the chalk a little smoother with your sleeve, and step inside. The calendar isn't gone yet, but it's losing its grip. People will smile at the names Vendémiaire, Germinal, Fructidor, but they won't schedule their lives around them. And maybe that's all right. Maybe time, real time, lives somewhere else entirely. Not in the pages of a civic almanac or the hands of a decimal clock, but in the rhythm of footsteps on stone, in bread dough rising on a windowsill, in lullabies still sung in months that no longer exist on paper, and in quiet laughter beneath a statue of a man holding a shovel on a day once called the Day of the Apple. Morning returns to Paris with the clatter of hooves and the scent of heat-stirred dust. But something is different today. Subtle, like a breeze shifting direction. The city hums a little lower. The bureaucrats speak a little softer. And the man on every corner, the one who usually shouts the revolutionary date with the bravado of a town crier, he's not there. You walk past the Bureau of Civic Timekeeping, expecting the usual line of citizens arguing over stamp errors and calendar misprints, but the doors are shut. A notice hangs crookedly from a nail. Due to administrative adjustments, public access will resume on Quarterty or its future equivalent. You blink. Even the officials don't seem sure anymore. Because change is coming. Not the loud kind with fanfare and declarations. No, this is the quiet dismantling of the calendar. The part where things simply stop working, and no one rushes to fix them. You buy a small paper at a café, Le Courrier de la République. It's thinner than usual, the ink faint. But there on page 2, sandwiched between a wine tax proposal and news of a grain shipment, is the headline, General Bonaparte proposes return to traditional timekeeping. You reread it 3 times. No exclamation marks. No thunder. Just a sentence that feels like a stone dropped in a pond. Because Napoleon Bonaparte, fresh from his victories in Italy and smelling of ambition, has no time for novelty. He prefers clarity, discipline, clocks that the army can read, ledgers that make sense. He isn't denouncing the calendar, not yet. He's simply offering an alternative. And in a country exhausted by reinvention, that's enough. Historians still debate Napoleon's true motives. Some say he saw the calendar as a nuisance. Others believe he knew it symbolized a revolution he no longer needed. But regardless of intent, the effect was swift. You pass a government building where a clerk halfway through updating a poster simply stops. The date reads Thermidor 17, and then nothing. Inside, people talk about next week, again, instead of the next decade. You overhear a teacher explaining the months to her class using both calendars. Messidor is July. Fructidor is August, and so on, children. But don't worry too much. There may be changes. The children just nod. They've already switched once. What's one more? You head toward the Place Vendôme, where whispers of Bonaparte's rise are thick in the air. A bookseller has stacked pamphlets titled The Empire and Its Order beside dusty almanacs still advertising Ho-Day celebrations. You stop to leaf through one of the almanacs. Its pages list all 365 Revolutionary Days, parsnip scythe ox soap, and one extra for leap years, the Revolution. You wonder if anyone will celebrate that next year. The seller shrugs when you ask if they're still printing them. I'll sell what's left, he says. Then maybe I'll just go back to Saints. And there it is again, that shift. Not rebellion, not outcry, just return. A creeping readoption of what once was. January, March, Sunday, birthday. The names that never quite left, that clung to people's mouths, even when the law demanded otherwise. You pass a bakery offering loaves, baked fresh for St. Peter's Day. You glance inside. The baker sees you. He winks. No one reports it. Not anymore. Because the revolution that tried to control time has run out of it. Bonaparte isn't shouting. He's not tearing down the calendar. He's just ignoring it, letting it slip through the cracks of useful governance. A general doesn't need decimal minutes. He needs soldiers who know when to march. You stop by a fountain where 2 men are arguing over what day it is. One insists it's still Thermidor. The other says it's August. A third walks by and says it's Thursday, and no one corrects him. You realize you don't feel sad. Not really. The calendar was beautiful in theory. A system built from rain and apples, shovels, and lavender. But it always felt like borrowed shoes too tight in the wrong places. Now they're slipping off. You head home as twilight bruises the rooftops, watching as the streets of Paris prepare for another Ducati no one will rest on. Because somewhere in a quiet chamber, A man in military uniform has begun reorganizing the world, and he prefers clocks that strike 12. The next morning, you wake to the sound of real church bells. You lie there for a moment, eyes open, letting it settle in low and measured, echoing off the stone like the sigh of an old god. For a second, you think you're dreaming. But no, the bells toll again. Not from some repurposed temple of reason, from an actual church. You sit up. Someone somewhere rang them on purpose. You step outside, and the street feels different. Not wild, not chaotic, just relieved. A little looser. Like Paris has unclenched its jaw. There's still a man shouting the date at the corner, but he hesitates halfway through Thermidor 20 year 2. He trails off. No one corrects him. No one listens. A child nearby tugs his mother's hand and asks if it's almost September again. She nods and doesn't mention the calendar. You walk down to the river where an old friend is feeding pigeons near the quay. She waves you over and holds up a folded sheet. It's a broadsheet printed by a small daring press, the kind that publishes before official permission is granted. Its headline reads Imperial Decree, Expected Calendar Revision Imminent. She taps it. They won't cancel it, she says, just shelve it, like a play nobody wants to perform. You sit beside her. She's not bitter, just tired. You remember the day of the plow, she asks. You do. You remember the celebration that never quite made sense, where officials handed out speeches children sang about wheat, and a cart full of tools was paraded through town like royalty. Back then, she says, I thought it was going to save us. Clean things. Make sense. You don't say anything, because it did make sense on paper. 12 perfect months, each with 30 days. Every day named for a tool or plant. A 10-day week, one rest day. Decimal time, all of it built like a poem written by a scientist. A clock designed by a dreamer. But dreams are fragile, and people are stubborn. You pass a kiosk selling calendars the old kind. January through December, saints and feast days, lovingly restored. There's a line. Someone in front of you jokes, wonder if they'll keep Pumpkin Day. Someone else replies, only if Napoleon eats pumpkins. Everyone laughs. The revolution's calendar has become a curiosity, a trivia question, a stage prop. The new empire isn't going to burn it. That would be too loud, too righteous. It will just let it fade. Historians still discuss what did survive, because not everything was swept away. The names lingered. Fructidor, Thermidor, Germinal. Those stuck in the French mind. They weren't just month names. They became eras, phrases loaded with memory. Since Germinal meant since the uprising. Thermidor meant the fall of the radicals. Even decades later, newspapers would refer to crises as new Thermidors, and the structure of the calendar, its rational precision, its daring break from tradition, inspired reformers, artists, and even other countries. People tried to create new calendars in Russia, in revolutionary Mexico, in small communes, in experimental utopias. Most failed. Some simply never started. But the idea survived. That time itself could be redesigned. That calendars are not eternal, but chosen, agreed upon, negotiated. You turn onto your street and find someone has chalked a list of both month systems on the wall. Thermidor above, August below. Each day matched, paired, translated. One last act of calendar diplomacy. You pull your watch from your pocket. Still ticking in 12 hours. Still defiantly imperfect, but it feels like yours again. You pass the bakery. The window reads, fresh rolls for St. Anne's Day. And below that, in smaller script, also Happy Turnip Day if you insist. The woman at the counter winks. Covering all the bases, you buy a roll and step back into the street. Overhead, the bells ring again, this time from two different churches. Competing tones, like old friends remembering how to talk. A child skips past singing the days of the week Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. No one stops her. No one whispers primity and correction. You glance back at the bakery window. Your reflection stares back soft, unsure, but real. The calendar tried to rewrite time, but time, it turns out, rewrites us back. You wake just before dawn. The sky still dark and wrapped in that hushed velvet that only exists when the city hasn't fully stirred. You lie still listening. No bells, no proclamations, just a distant cartwheel creaking and the gentle whistle of a man sweeping stone. The calendar is still here technically. Today is Thermidor 21 year 2, but no one says it anymore. At least not out loud. You step outside and head toward the Jardin des Plantes, a place where time seems to breathe differently. The trees don't care what day it is. The bees certainly don't. And in the pond at the center, a duck bobs peacefully in revolutionary indifference. This morning you're thinking about the sansculotades, the bonus days, because the calendar had a problem, even in its perfection. 12 months of 30 days. That's 360. But the Earth stubbornly takes 365. And a quarter to make its round. So they added 5 extra days at the end of each year. Not in any month. Just floating 5 days out of time. Sansculotades, they were called, named for the common people of the revolution. The ones without fancy trousers. The soul of the streets. The calendar gave them 5 days to celebrate everything that didn't quite fit anywhere else. They had names too. Virtue Day, Genius Day, Labor Day, Opinion Day, Reward Day, and in leap years, a 6th, Revolution Day. You smile, sitting on a bench beneath a fig tree, imagining what those days must have felt like. No saint, no sun cycle, no week. Just a day devoted to a single concept. A baker once told you his father proposed to his mother on Genius Day, said it was fitting. She was smarter than him, and he was wise enough to admit it. You like that story. Historians still wonder about these floating days. Were they truly secular celebrations of human ideals, or just a patch for an imperfect equation? Either way, they were oddly magical. Not tied to production or prayer, but to imagination. A child once told you he liked Reward Day best, because sometimes, he whispered, it feels like the calendar is saying thank you. You wander toward a small cafe, opening its shutters early. A woman sets out chairs humming something old. You ask if she's ever celebrated the Sansculotades. She nods. Every Opinion Day I serve 2 cakes and let people argue. And Reward Day, she shrugs. No one remembers what to do with that one. You sit, sip a small cup of bitter coffee, and feel the city stretch its arms beneath the warming sky. Above, clouds begin to gather, slow and soft, the way they do before autumn starts to whisper. The revolutionary calendar, for all its ambition, couldn't erase seasons, couldn't standardize longing, couldn't regulate the ache of late August, because time isn't just math. It's memory. It's touch. It's the breath you take when you hear a name you haven't spoken in years. You close your eyes and remember the rhythm of the months as they were taught to you long ago. Vendémiaire, Brumaire, Frimaire, Niveaux, pluviose, ventose, germinal, floreal, prairial, messidor, thermidor, fructidor, and then those final five. The sansculottides, time set aside. Not for crops, not for kings, but for us. You rise, stretch, and begin the slow walk home. The streets are beginning to fill. No one mentions the calendar. But in chalk on the side of the bakery, someone has drawn a little star with the words, "Tomorrow is Virtue Day." Bring something kind. You smile. Maybe the calendar didn't fail. Maybe it just became a story. A strange, beautiful, overcomplicated, deeply human story. And now, with each step toward your door, you carry it with you, not in your paperwork, but in your bones. Time moves forward, but it also remembers. The street fades behind you as you climb the stairs to your room, each step soft beneath your feet. The key slides into the lock with a quiet click, and the door opens to the kind of hush you only get when the world is holding its breath between chapters. You close it gently behind you and exhale. Inside, the light is golden. The kettle whistles faintly. A book lies open on the table, its pages curled like a cat in sleep. And somewhere beyond the reach of clocks, time slows. No decade, no Sunday, no thermidor or fructidor. Just now, you light a candle, not because you need it, but because the flicker is comforting. The flame dances, casting gentle shadows. Your shoulders soften. There's no need to check the date. The world outside will still turn. And in that turning, the revolutionary calendar remains not as law, but as memory. A whisper of a time when people believed they could change everything, even the sky. You sit. The clock ticks. You breathe. Let it all fall away. The decimals, the decrees, the days of the parsnip and the pickaxe. There is nothing left to calculate tonight. Only the slow rhythm of your breath, the warmth of the room, and the knowledge that you are and have always been part of time's quiet, imperfect song. Close your eyes, let it hold you, and rest.